And they grilled me for 2 hours around my process and how big the team was, and obviously it was very small. And I remember we were so young that we didn't have business cards, and a designer friend of mine created a business card for me. So it's 2 bits of paper on a bit of card, and you could see it was handmade. So I gave it to JP Morgan, but I had to, at the end of the meeting, sneak it and take it back because I didn't want them to know, what's this guy turning up with this sort of handmade business card.
This is Alan Smith, and you are welcome to the Entrepreneur Transition Podcast. If you're looking for ideas and inspiration to guide you on your business and personal journey, you, my friend, have come to the right place. Well, hello, Damian, Simon, welcome to the podcast. How are you guys?
Yeah, really good.
Very
nice
good.
to see you, Alan.
Good, guys. Now, we're trying something a bit different this time. Never done this before. Speaking to 2 founders at the same time on the podcast. So it's either going to be a fantastic success or a complete disaster. So the next sort of 45 to 60 minutes will determine that. So let's see what happens. So guys, let me start with you, Damian. What I'd like to do, we're talking about this kind of whole entrepreneurial journey. So take me back to the beginning, if you will. Were you a born entrepreneur? Were you one of these kids at school who was sort of selling lemonade what was your entrepreneurial journey? How did you get started?
Yeah, great question. I definitely was that lad at school. So I was selling anything. So my dad was an entrepreneur. He had a duty-free business. I was selling, anything from sort of football medallions to anything sort of duty free at school, and just loved selling, loved talking to people, and really sort of working it, and just building relationships. And then sort of throughout college, university, always finding a way. So college, I sold cars at one point, and try to make a bit of money. And so just any which way. At uni, I had a couple of websites that I guess funded my university. So I had a website called Great Outdoors and one called Pumping Iron. At the time, I was heavily into bodybuilding. You had loads of time on your hand. I was studying IT, information technology, and all of that great stuff. It was at the I guess mid 90s, so when the sort of internet and the whole sort of bubble started to grow. While at uni, I was, I guess, a bit bored and also super passionate about technology. So I then started a couple of websites. And they were content. They were selling products and sort of premium services. So super early on, Pumping Iron was a film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and all about his journey and to Mr. Olympia, so always any which way, anything I saw, I wanted to sell. I wanted to make money and progress.
Really interesting. So you definitely, there's no doubt about that. You are one of this rare breed, a born entrepreneur right from the get-go. And interesting, your family, obviously, your dad was that and ran his own business, who presumably influenced you as you were growing up as a kid.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't remember how old I was. I mean, I know I was developing sort of when I was 10, 11 on a BBC Micro, and I love computers, and he was a early adopter of sort of very basic sort of IT systems in a small office, but loved, I don't know, I loved the stationery, I loved the business cards, I loved the briefcase. It was,
you were born
it was
to
my
do this
world,
stuff.
definitely.
Amazing.
100%.
Amazing. Right, Simon, over to you. What's your version of that? Were you the same selling stuff in school, or did you take a different route?
Yeah, I'd say my background's probably quite different to Damian's. I'm obviously an accountant by training, so I'm probably the sensible one out of the pair of us. So my route was, I'd say, a lot more traditional. So I did an engineering degree at college. I will say I've always loved IT. I think I'm probably a frustrated technologist at heart. But when I graduated, I sort of had a few years off traveling, and then joined KPMG to train to be an accountant. I've got to say, I'm not entirely sure why. It's just kind of what I stumbled into at the time, I think. I had no sort of business knowledge at all. I'd always studied science, engineering subjects, and it just seemed like a great way to get a general grounding in business. So I joined KPMG in London, did my articles there, and on qualifying, sort of looked around at what to do. And so this was going back to '94 when I finished my articles. And just at that time, Mandela had been elected as president in South Africa, and an opportunity came up to go onto the Common and out to their Johannesburg office. I mean, I love traveling. I've done lots of it. My parents have always traveled a lot, and it just seemed like a fantastic life opportunity. So I went there in '95, just after they won the Rugby World Cup. So arranging the secondment was interesting, in that you couldn't talk to anyone for about 3 months. So they were too busy sort of celebrating, partying. Got there, and I've got to say, I had an absolutely incredible 3 years. The lifestyle in Joburg was fantastic, and the work there really interesting. I think I was the first secondee out there for about 15 years or so, because the whole concept had dried up in apartheid times. No one was really going there to work at all. And work-wise, it was fantastic because everyone's looking to reinvest back into the country. So I moved from audit. I went out there and audit and sort of quickly joined their corporate finance team. And the work there was really interesting. So I think, having come from London, they gave you work that you wouldn't get within a shot of doing in London. So that was fantastic. And it got to '98, and it was really a case of, do you stay here for longer? And I think once you've been in Africa for sort of 5 years or so, you're kind of committing the rest of your life to there almost. Had nothing back in the UK, and I just thought it's probably a bit risky here. So I made the decision to come back. Didn't really, I think, having kind of been an advisor now for sort of 7 years odd since I started my career, it was a case of feeling I don't really want to just be the advisor anymore. I kind of want to put my cock on the block for the decisions that you make in life. So I just really wanted to get out there and yes, and just try and sort of do it for myself, really. So I joined a technology company through an introduction I had when I was out in South Africa, and I've just been involved at a sort of C level of tech business ever since, really. So obviously met Damian in 2001. And we founded our first business control circle together in 2001. Damien can probably talk a bit about the background to how we met, because he had a previous business at the time that I was potentially going to get involved in. That didn't happen, but we kept in contact, and a year or so later, we co-founded Control Circle together.
Okay, but Simon, so you had a lot of, I would call it sort of practical, technical experience around the mechanics of running a business. You were in the corporate finance team. KPMG Johannesburg.
Yes, that's right.
In a kind of fledgling, kind of regenerated, an entire, I guess, business community was sort of re-energized post Mandela, post World Cup, and so on. So I guess you're learning a lot about the mechanics of business and scaling and selling businesses and all that sort of thing, which helps put you in good stead when you return to the UK. So.
Yes,
and then you obviously you had just a personal inkling and attraction towards tech businesses. That was something you were just personally interested in, right?
Definitely, yeah. And I think I think for me it was, I think once you've been in Africa for a while, it does generally feel like frontier land a bit. You get the impression, especially someone like Joburg at that time, when there's lots of reinvestment happening back into the country. There's a really sort of a real feel-good factor around the whole country that, great, the new future's ours, we're going to get on with things. And that's kind of quite an inspiring environment to be in. So you generally got the feeling you could go and create things, make things happen, etc. And I think I came back to the UK quite enthused with that sort of attitude still. And just really wanted to get out there and sort of do something for myself that I was responsible for. I think probably most entrepreneurs or most people that start businesses do so because they don't really want to be beholden to anybody else and want to take responsibility for the decisions that they make and reap the rewards of it, or struggle through if times are difficult. But at the end of the day, you know it's down to you how that business is going to do. You can't blame anybody else, and if it's successful, it's down to you or your partners as well. And that's it's quite an inspiring way to think about things.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's kind of all on you. But you can reap the rewards and the benefits, but you're also accountable for any failures as well. So it's quite an extreme experience, but good.
And it's certainly hard work. Anyone that thinks building a business is easy has probably never done one themselves before. as you know, Alan, you've obviously done very well yourself as well.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll come back to that. So I'm just trying to join the dots and complete this story. So, Damian, meantime, you're carrying on with your entrepreneurial life. You're building websites and so on. I guess you come out of college and you're doing some other things. So, what was your first kind of entrepreneurial venture post education? What did you start then?
Yeah, so I was running pumping iron. I had great outdoors. I was earning a bit of money. I basically got approached to work in the city to do e-business consultancy, sort of back in the day when they called it e-business. So basically anything sort of technology, internet related, and obviously super fast paced, loads happening, really interesting. Everything from new software to data centers and hosting to connectivity. So we were doing some really cool stuff. And then basically after about sort of 9 months, I just thought, oh my God, I could be doing this myself. I was meeting the likes of Freshfield, Tokyo Mitsubishi Bank, some really big corporate players, advising them and creating strategies for them, and then just thought I could do this myself and actually not only do the consultancy but do the build, the web, the e-commerce. Actually, how far can I go with this? But this is a really exciting business at a time where there was huge demand. So I set up a company called 5 Online. Got funding. I sort of felt I was literally fresh out of school. I was still really naive, didn't know anything really about running a business, and had a load of money, and it was okay, I better get some desks, I better hire someone. Obviously knew nothing about recruitment process or anything really, but out of whether it's a bit of luck or intuition, that just met some really smart people. So my first guy was in Birmingham, and working for his I'm a Brummie as well, so we connected. But he was working with his dad, and he was a sort of a network, a bit of an all-rounder. And I persuaded him to come down to London and work for me, and he was awesome, Richard, absolutely awesome and super smart. And we basically went out. I went out and pitched. I want to run your website, and I want to potentially build a store for you, so an e-commerce store. And back then, it just it wasn't very automated. You'd work with big platforms, and then I built a team to really deliver that. And we also got involved in connectivity and hosting. So we were really, we were in the deep end. We worked on huge projects. We had a massive outsourcing deal with IBM, but the likes of Blockbuster and Build Online, and just incredible customers. But again, didn't really have I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have, sadly, someone like Simon to help me and guide me on the sort of the structure and things like the financial cash flow, etc. We were winning business. It was an exciting time, but really needed that sort of that understanding, that guidance.
So
in the back office.
In terms of the timeline, this is what, late 90s?
Yeah, exactly. So this would be late 90s. So really before the sort of bubble burst.
Yeah, I was just about to say, to follow this through, because Simon mentioned 2001 is when you guys got together.
It was actually
right?
a bit earlier. It was actually
Is
a
it?
bit earlier.
I'm just trying to
Yeah,
backtrack on the dates around the whole tech rec thing. That was sort of 2000 to 2001, wasn't it? Generally, round about then, when
yeah.
the whole world was going, everything was about the web. Everything with any business at all, we add or .com to the end of it, suddenly was worth millions and billions or something.
Yeah,
And then the whole thing, of course, fell off a cliff. So what was going on? So you're in that space. You're in the tech business.
Yeah, it was. It was crazy, and I was off to New York. I remember in San Francisco, Macromedia throwing hundreds of copies of Flash and Director out to the crowds. Free software, and before Adobe bought them, and it was crazy times. Obviously, new technology, really interesting. We worked with a company called Intershop that was a leading German kind of e-commerce software company and became really one of their leading development partners. So we won IBM through them. They would bring us in, and so we did with sort of very little understanding of how to run a business. We did really well, and then through an investor. Who actually is now an investor of Amplify, Gavin Petkin, who recently sort of ran BGF, Business Growth Fund. He introduced me to Simon, and he said, you're very entrepreneurial, really exciting business, loved all aspects of it. So it was, the consultancy, it was the build of a website and store. And then we also created our own software that would integrate to accounting packages. So Navision, Sage, and it would be fairly automated, from someone, buying something in the store to fulfillment warehouses. Now, obviously, it's just done with Spotify and they integrate to everything. But back then it was super early. And then he introduced me to Simon and just said, you need a really switched on a commercial a sort of finance director. They couldn't find anyone, so I was left with Si. No.
He loves you too.
I have to say, I still don't know why Si. I mean, I was a different character back then. I was a big guy. I sort of was heavily into bodybuilding, and then dropped all the bodybuilding and training for work, and I was just working mad hours, I was very different, I think, and how he or why he really connected with me. Clearly there was something there, and I think our joint passion for technology, definitely our joint passion of creating something. Clearly there was, he'd done his time and was looking for something new, and then we started a company called Car Park, which basically was from my experience of hosting and looking after infrastructure. When the bubble burst, basically half the companies went bust, but also half the providers went under. But also the providers that were remaining had to really reduce costs. They were hemorrhaging cash. So companies that we work with, like Exodus Communications, so big data center player out of Santa Clara in California. They did a lot of acquisitions, buying with paper, and basically they were hemorrhaging cash. So they had to get rid of their important engineers, the guys that were actually doing all the work and managing. They couldn't get rid of the building because no one wanted to buy the building. But they had a set of customers. They had those customers in. Half maybe had gone under, but they did have some very, very big clients. So I remember lastminute.com, when they first started, it was one rack of infrastructure. And overnight it was, like a jungle of cables as they grew and had, amazing success. The Flutter, that became Betfair, and there's some incredible Hotmail before Microsoft bought them. Some really cool, for me, really cool projects. So basically, we saw an opportunity to be that what is termed as managed services company for these big data centers, these partners, where they would bring us into their customers, and so that was our sort of proposition. And with no engineers and me working full time and Si supporting it in the background, we went out and sort of pitched and presented. And every time I spoke to someone, they were going under or making redundancies. But slowly, we started to get a bit of momentum. And our first customer, interesting enough, was JP Morgan, their fund platform, which clearly you couldn't get a better brand. At the time, they outsourced to IBM. It was a huge outsourcing contract, but they wanted a specialist to look after these particular devices, and we could do it with our sort of small team, and it was a couple of grand a month. But it was on a 3 to 5 year contract. That couple of grand a month, we really delivered. We did a great job. I remember some, when it was just me and one part-time engineer, I would answer the phone in different accents. So I was like the call center. So I would do Australian. Basically, I'm not very good at accents. So anything that I could do.
Well, just so you sounded like different people.
Completely.
To feel like it was a bigger business.
Yeah, and it was amazing because the JP Morgan would go, you guys are amazing because your systems and process, because I speak to your call center, they know exactly who I am. They know that the technology I've got, and it's Brilliant. A seamless experience through to Damian, you as the sales guy, and it's just brilliant.
You all seem to know what's going on.
Exactly.
Your internal communications must be amazing.
Completely. Exactly. The systems and the process. And obviously I'm saying that's exactly what you're paying for. And so yeah.
Let me just backtrack for a second if I can. I just want to keep the just this kind of timeline. It's fascinating. This is what this podcast is all about. It's the entrepreneurial journey. And everyone's obviously got their own unique story. But going back, because you had this e-commerce business and this website business, what did you say it's called? Five
Online.
Five Online. And of course, you came up against the whole kind of tech crash and so on. But so what happened to that business? Did that just fold, or was it sold? What was?
No, it was sold. I mean, I have to say, again, sort of naivety. I should have kept going. I should have. Probably focused on the hosting, and got Si more involved, and we could have been a big a big hoster, but that was sold to a AIM listed PLC that saw the opportunity to really bring several companies together, and it was a lucky I have to say it was a lucky exit because. I can't remember exactly, but it feels like months after it was a big crash, and obviously everyone, not everyone, but there were many casualties. And
all right, so your timing was fortunate then. You cashed out,
and that was not to do with me at all. I have to say,
a bit of luck that you
very much so.
You'll admit to. I mean, I know we'll talk more about. Control Circle, the bigger exit there. But any lessons or experiences from that particular sale? Was it just a bit of luck? They approached you and the timing was right?
I mean, I would say, I think on the sale, I mean, it was fortunate I had a relationship there. They liked us. Clearly you've got to be open to opportunity and you've got to build your network, and if you are and you're attractive, then clearly you're going to exits are going to present themselves and opportunities. So clearly we were mixing the right circles and saying the right thing, and we were using the right technologies. There was lots of things we were doing right, but I think if I'd had maybe Si a year before or even 2 years before, and we created a really strong, scalable, structured entity, it would have been a very different story. It would have been, 50 times the sort of exit.
Right. Okay. So you've exited out of that business, and then you get introduced by Gavin to Simon, and then so Simon, we'll go back to you now. What did you think when you met this Arnold Schwarzenegger from Birmingham.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a very different character, certainly to me, and to, I guess, a lot of other people that I'd really dealt with before. I'd always sort of dealt with more, sort of, I guess you call them more corporate type characters, and yeah, Damian's definitely an individual. I mean, to give you an example, I always remember we had a customer at Control Circle a few years later called Confetti, and who were the wedding websites. We supported their platform for them. And I always remember Damian went into the customer meeting there. He was going through a phase of living in Paris for a while and commuting back across. And he went in there wearing yellow gloves and a matching yellow beret. And I mean, it sounds horrendous. And to be
As
honest,
you do.
it was horrendous. Only Damian could have carried it off. But I think every time he went back there, ever since, everyone remembered him. And, you know, it takes a certain...
Very memorable, that's for sure.
Exactly, yes. And in that kind of role, when you're a sort of small business and trying to win customers and keep them going, then it's really important to be memorable, be a bit different and stand out from the crowd. And yeah, that's probably the first thing I remember about Damian. He's always a guy that, I'm incredibly friendly, fantastic networker, and always kind of stood out from the crowd a bit. And yeah, Damian...
But clearly quite different to your whole sort of style, Simon.
Absolutely.
So, and you obviously complemented each other. There was a sort of yin and yang, and you both brought your individual skill sets and experiences to the company. So, what was the sort of foundation of the business? Tell us a bit more about that, Simon. As you got this company off the ground, the two of you get introduced. You feel that you can work together, despite Damian's dress sense. So tell us about the origins of that. What was the big idea? What problems were you trying to solve, and how did you get going?
Yeah, very good. So it's much like Damian said already. So I actually met him while he was still at Five Online, and then Gavin was potentially going to get involved with that business from an investment side as well, which is kind of why he asked me to look over it with him and give him my thoughts on it. And, you know, I said, Damian's a fantastic guy, but, you know, the whole thing there is rather chaotic, to say the least. And they'd won a load of business, but, you know, I think as Damian's articulated, they probably didn't have the strongest management ethos there. They were just doing loads of interesting stuff. So after that sale, myself and Damian just sort of stayed in contact. You know, we liked each other, and, you know, enjoyed each other's company. And I guess over the next sort of year or so, then you know, we'd meet up fairly regularly, and you know, just talk about what was happening in the tech space. And a bit like Damian said, I guess post the dot-com crash, the big kind of opportunity we saw was around these big data center companies. So people like Exodus had sprung up. Their original business model was to be a data center that did the hosting, did the connectivity to all the people hosted within that data center, and then manage those infrastructures on behalf of the clients that were hosted there as well. You know, post the dot-com crash, when these companies were running short of money, obviously they couldn't save money on the physical site because that was a fairly fixed cost. So they laid off their technical staff that were supporting those infrastructures. They weren't generally profitable at the moment because a lot of people had fallen by the wayside. And sort of looking back now at those days, there were lots of new technologies coming online. So it was very much the early days of people having hosted platforms and people doing stuff on the web. So, you know, elements of the network, things like load balancers that are now commonplace, just weren't around in those days. So whilst they were laying people off, there was lots of new technologies coming online. You could clearly see, even though there'd been a bit of a sort of dip in the market for hosted services and people in that space were struggling for money at the moment, you could clearly see that's where the future was going. I don't think anyone disputed that. And more people were doing more stuff online, and that was really the future of every single business. So, you know, the conversation we had was really around, well, look, you've got all these infrastructures now. There's no one really that we could see that was set out to manage those, you know, as a pure play managed services business. So, you know, whilst ultimately we would do the hosting, we'd take big suites and data centers at the hosting, whilst we do the connectivity to keep arms wrapped around the customer, we always really set out our business to be that pure play managed service business. Clearly, as Damian said, it's interesting to get started with because you have that interesting conundrum of the chicken and egg situation, really, where you're trying to sort of sell support and implementations for different technologies, whilst you can't really afford to take on the people to actually support them until you've got the customers on board. So we began to take one or two sort of contractors on board that would do the implementation of various different technologies. Once you'd implemented, a large load balancer, say, somewhere, and again, these were quite new technologies, so the clients themselves wanted one but didn't quite know how to actually implement them. It was a fairly easy sale to say, well, look, we've implemented it. Do you want us to manage it 24/7 for you? And of course, because I don't really know how to do it myself. So it started off sort of fairly small scale. I was doing other bits and pieces to bring money in as well to sort of support the business. Damian was sort of banging the phones full time, trying to pick up new business for us. And all the time we were sort of managing our cash flows very carefully to try and just invest ahead of the curve. So we would sort of see, well, look, let's try and get some expertise in this bit of networking technology or this bit of security technology, these firewalls as an example. We would sort of sell some support and implementation for these firewalls and get 2 or 3 customers that would then say yes. And in the meantime, we had a sort of consultant that we were getting ready to bring on board, if not full-time, certainly part-time, who could then provide that implementation support expertise for us. So it was very much hand-to-mouth, managing the cash flows, trying to invest ahead of the curve, but trying not to overextend yourself too much. It was very much a balancing act for the first 2 or 3 years, really.
Yeah, real careful balancing act as you're really trying to get the whole thing off the ground in an emerging market. I suppose technology was all pretty new, and I guess you guys are learning as well as you're on the job.
Yeah.
So I'm always interested in, if you like, the human journey, the personal journey. I mean, how are you funding this? I mean, how are you paying your bills and so on? Because the early days, there's not a lot of money in the system yet. So first of all, did you take outside investment when you got started?
So at this stage, no, we were sort of funding it ourselves. We had some savings from previous roles. I was doing some sort of consulting work elsewhere to bring that money in and putting that money into the business. Where we'd get some decent setup fees, we could use that to pay Damian some salary as well. It's very much living hand to mouth for the first 2 or 3 years, I'd say. It was
on a personal level. Did either of you have other halves, partners?
Yeah,
Kids,
I'm interested there, and it's probably the biggest sacrifice I'll ever make. But I let Damian move in with me for a while to save on money. I had a spare room in my house. He moved in with this massive hairy tarantula that lived in the other spare room that I had. It's definitely.
This is a true story, right?
It's a true story. Yes, scared the living bejeebies
out of the way you're saying it.
Yes. It scared the life out of me, and it scared the life out of anybody else that ever wanted to come and stay with us, I think, as well. But yes,
you not only had to feed yourselves, you had to feed a hairy tarantula as well during this early foundation startup. That's a story not to be forgotten. So you're bootstrapping, you're scrapping around, using your own money, investing it just to get the whole thing going. Let me ask you, Damian, I'll come over to you. When you got together, your early stages of sounds really exciting, new technology, and you as you say, every day is a new opportunity and new clients. But did you have an idea you're going to build to sell from day one? Is this something you just knew you were going to sell it, or was it you never thought it through?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Simon and I are really aligned on this. I think we know we wanted to build something that's going to create wealth for us, but also the team. And we always had a view, let's build a really strong business where I definitely didn't have it before. Let's build a really robust business that's really scalable. If you do that, and it's obviously highly profitable, it's growing year on year, which we did, incredible customer base, reoccurring revenue, and they were tied in for a 3 to 5 year term, then an exit will present itself, whatever that would look like. And I have to say, through the journey, there were lots of different potential buyers. So we never said, or certainly I didn't, in 5 years, we want to sell for this and let's go. It was, let's build a great business and, it's going to happen.
I think sorry, Alan,
Right.
I think
Okay.
I completely agree with what Damian said. I think people that look for the exit at the start probably potentially go into it for the wrong reasons. I think in life in general, you've got to enjoy the journey and not just be completely focused on the destination that you get to. And if you're not enjoying the journey and enjoying seeing it build and creating something, then I don't think you'll enjoy what you're going to go through to get to that end position.
No, true. And it's certainly a conversation I've had with previous guests as well. And there was a sort of general feeling that if you were just trying to sell from day one, then you're going to cut costs a lot. You're not going to hire expensive people. You want to keep your overheads absolutely bare minimum. That's not necessarily the most beautiful business if you're just cutting your overhead every single opportunity. So you build a business that you just think just a fantastic scaled and scaling business, which is, I mean, some of the the key vital parts that I've understood about building value, things like recurring revenue, things like growth, things like long-term contracts, obviously all of which are sort of putting together a strong valuation. So again, this was just an ongoing organic thing. Did you go to the market? Did you take external investment at any time?
No, I think it was after about 8 years. So Si did the most incredible job for 8 years, and all credit to him, because we were getting bigger and bigger opportunities. What was a few grand initially became, one of our first big deals was eSpotting, which was it was a big search engine at the time, and it was about 25 grand a month and about $250,000 up front, and it was 3-year term, and it was big for us. And then we did bigger and bigger. So in the end, we were billing some customers $500,000 a month.
Wow.
So when we won R.R. Donnelley, the big print company, which again was a substantial deal, or even a KPMG, big projects, there was a big demand for IT systems. It might be not just hundreds of thousands, but might even be a million up front. And Si had to manage that cash flow, where we didn't take external funding for the first 8 years. And then when we did, it was really, I guess just after that R.R. Donnelley, where they were asking about, we were winning bigger and bigger deals. Basically, we were going up against the IBMs and BTs, but we were way smaller. I think we were much cooler, and we cared more. I think, we really cared, and we wanted to deliver a great service. And we were getting asked, look, who's, I remember being in the taxi with R.R. Donnelley, and he said, love you guys. We're in a bit of a tricky situation because AT&T is a big customer of ours. They're spending $400 million a year on printing all the mobile phone bills and everything. But we really like you guys. We'd love to meet your CEO. We'd love to. And this is when I was fronting it as a sales guy. I'd love to meet your CEO. I'd love to meet your backers and your board. And I'm thinking, that's me and me.
Yeah.
I'll meet you as much as you want, but it became.
And you stopped
clear
doing your Australian accents by this time as well.
But only just.
Okay.
Only just. I was getting caught out. But yeah, we needed a bit more substance. We needed to get external investors that could give us, that backing. And
was that kind of like a credibility thing? You want to see all these people and your backers, and you just felt if you want to play at the sort of big boys table, if you will, you've got to almost kind of redefine your structure. I mean, Simon, that's in your wheelhouse, isn't it? The kind of the operational infrastructure.
Yes. So just to backtrack slightly, so if you talked about the timeline before, so we obviously started the business 2001. I'd say by 2005 we'd properly built up the business to the extent that we could properly support the whole of an infrastructure, and had the 24/7 team on board to do that. So the days of sort of ducking and diving were sort of finished by 2005, really, and it was then building up more credibility. We weren't expanding this range of services so much at that point. We were just really winning bigger and bigger customers. And I've got to say, for that, Damian is a preeminent IT sales person. He's the best I've ever come across, and I've come across some other very good ones in my past. But Damian is preeminent in that way. So it's winning bigger deals, and also you do a good job for your existing customers. They give you more of the infrastructure to manage. So organically, it was growing very strongly as well. And the metrics were really fairly simple for us. We're trying to sign up support contracts for between 3 and 5 years. And each year, 80% of our revenues that we forecast for the following year were already contracted because we had large contracted revenue bases. So, it's fairly easy to forecast where we're trying to get to. It's fairly easy to plan for the business because we had such good contracted revenue bases, and we always delivered a really good service for the customers. And probably one of the things we're most proud of is that we never lost a customer through poor service in the whole time we were in business. A few went by the wayside. A few we lost on sort of price terms. Obviously, a few went bust, being online businesses. But we never actually lost one because the service levels were too poor.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So
what sort of scale did you get to? What was your head count at the peak? And
so
if you can share to
So sort of just come back to your previous question as well. So I'll sort of cover them both off. So post R.R. Donnelly, I think we were then in a big pitch around May the following year, and there's a company called WorldCheck that did high level sort of personnel vetting for the banks, etc., and it's an online platform. And we were effectively told, look, we got down to the last two, as us and IBM Global Services, the last two pitching for the outsourced management of their entire infrastructure that was their business, basically. And their CTO phoned Damian and basically said to him, look, personally, I think you do the best job for us. We really like you guys. We had great customer references. We'd sort of invested in building our own reporting portal, so it showed the customers their infrastructure and how we managed it. Because clearly the issue for us is they're paying us quite a lot per month. If there's no issues there, people are saying, well, what are we paying them for? You're paying us because there are no issues. But if you can demonstrate to them why there's no issues there, it sort of enables you to justify what you're charging them. But we had the phone call, or Damian had the phone call from their sort of CTO basically saying, look, I really like you guys. I think you do the best job, but it's too risky for me. 5-year support contract from yourselves. You're a kind of small business. Clearly our balance sheet was shot to pieces because we're using that to fund the business. He made the decision then to go with IBM because it was a safer bet for him. So at that point,
that's you lived through that classic phrase. No one ever got fired for choosing IBM.
Absolutely,
right. They took the least, what they perceived as being the least risky option.
Absolutely,
which, you can't blame them for it, but you're sort of playing at that table with these big organizations. I guess that's tough. Then you've probably dominated the level that you were at in terms of size and scale. Now you're playing at the ultimate, and it's tough, then, isn't it? Because you can't. It's hard to compete. If someone is going to choose a business or a supplier based on their, if you like, their global size or their balance sheet or something, well,
yes,
you're not going to win that one, unfortunately.
No.
So it was during this time you began to sort of rethink. So what sort of size were you? Obviously you weren't quite IBM size.
No,
what sort of scale were you at?
So that we're probably turning over about 14 million or so at the time, and had 80 odd people on board, something like that, roughly.
Yeah, sizable business.
Yes, it was definitely getting there, and out of that 14 million, probably 10 million was contracted. So we had that as our sort of future run rate. So we're in a really nice position as a business, and the decision we made really was there was 3 reasons really for taking investment. One, we felt it would give us that corporate credibility. We had a substantial backer, hopefully that would take that off the table. They'd know we would be around in 5 or 7 years' time if that was a length of support contract they were prepared to give us. Secondly, myself and Damian took a bit of money out of the business at the time because we clearly had never really taken any money out of the business. We just reinvested it all. And thirdly, I think this is now about 2010. So things like AWS now and the cloud were coming there. We didn't ever really think it was going to seriously impact on our larger customers because they had sort of dedicated infrastructures that were really specifically built for their application. And if you've got a large infrastructure and you're using it 24/7, it's actually cheaper to have it hosted and managed rather than go onto a cloud service because you're not paying that premium for where to spin things up and down. But what we did see was this sort of whole concept of utility billing was going to make a bit of a comeback. And personally, I kind of hate the word cloud sometimes. It means so many different things to so many different people. But we could certainly see this sort of utility billing complex or some idea was going to come back. So we wanted to invest in certain systems ourselves, principally sort of big storage systems, because a big issue that was facing our clients was what to spend on things like their disaster recovery site. So do you spend the same amount on your DR site that you spend on your live site and have it sat idle for 90% of the time, or do you not spend that, but then when you do need it, how do you then spin up an infrastructure very quickly? So what we were starting to do was to think more cleverly about how we could help organizations to do that. So whilst we're managing their live site, we then invested in our own storage systems, so we could back up their systems offline onto our systems. And if their main system went down, then we could very quickly spin up a second site for them from what we'd had stored on our own sort of storage systems. And we sold that then as an on-demand sort of charge per month for them.
So what sort of organization was it? A private equity company who came in and got some funding?
So we went out to 3 or 4 growth equity businesses. I've got to say the response was fantastic. We prepared fairly well for it, and clearly having come from a corporate finance background, it helped with what they'd be looking for, etc. Then in the end, we went with Scottish Equity Partners, SEP,
okay, right.
who I've got to say we had a fantastic relationship with them. Stuart Patterson was the investor director that invested in us and sat on our board. I think they were a really good investor. They're a really good tech investor, and they got that balance just right between giving good advice, good introductions, but not being overbearing or trying to tell us how to run the business. And it kind of helps that you're being fairly successful and getting along okay.
Yeah, for sure. It might have been different if you weren't quite so successful, but it sounded like a good partnership, and it worked well. So they supported you through a period of time. So just fast forwarding, then you've had some investment. You're still predominantly independent.
So SEP had about 30% of the business or so. Myself and Damian owned about sort of 30% each, and then roughly there's about 10% as share options in staff hands.
Right. Okay. So staff had some skin in the game as well.
Yeah.
As part of that. So at some point, what triggered the decision to actually exit and sell the business completely? Back to you, Damian. What was going on? Did you receive an offer you couldn't refuse, or what actually happened?
Yeah, I think Si and I have put everything into Control Circle, and we took very modest salaries, didn't really pay bonuses, until we sort of built out the management team. And our aim on getting the investment in was, yes, to take a bit of cash out and get a nice place and live a little bit more comfortably. But predominantly, the majority went back into the business. But that allowed us to really build out the management team. So we brought on a COO who subsequently became CEO. We bought an IT director. Basically, we really built out that team. So the business was much less dependent on Simon and I. I think we're acutely aware of our strengths. So wanted to build out a more robust team that could really scale, that could take on these bigger and bigger contracts. And I think also through that process, I guess it goes from your baby to actually it's our baby, and it's no longer fully under your control, and you've got to delegate, you've got to empower and give responsibility to others. And I think with that, there was a change, I guess, over the next 2 to 3 years, where we kind of thought, look, we've done it for a long time. I think there were things that were happening in the market, and we were becoming definitely more and more attractive. we definitely got it right, focusing on the managed services and becoming excellent at the really complex stuff, because there were loads of players out there that were doing what we call vanilla services, quite basic sort of connectivity and hosting. We were doing really the really high margin, more complex stuff. So actually, we became super attractive to lots of different entities, both UK and US and Asia. So I think lots of things started to come together, where I think Si and I probably met over a green tea a few times, saying actually, we could be in a really, really exciting position over the next 12, 24 months, and then we started to get offers, and start to have those kind of conversations.
And what did you do to start to get offers? Did you appoint an M&A guy? I know, Simon, you had obviously your own professional experience and background. So what did you do? Did you hire somebody, or did you do that initial work yourself?
I would say sort of, within a year or so, the investment from SEP, the market was becoming really interesting. We always used to make a feature of meeting VCs, and I think we thought our eventual exit would probably be a US VC looking to do a buy and build in Europe. That's how a few of our competitors have gone. So for us, meeting VCs was always really interesting, predominantly because they'd invested in a load of companies that probably had a big IT requirement. So for us, it was a great way to meet potential customers.
Bit of prospecting at the time.
Absolutely, yes.
Always be selling.
Absolutely. And we did pick up customers through that route as well.
Nice.
For the VCs, one, they learned more about us, and also we could just educate them on the market, the technologies, and where they thought we were going. So it was a very sort of symbiotic relationship at those meetings. So I'll say most of the conversations were fairly sort of superficial. Nothing really got particularly serious. We were approached in February of 2013 by a member of, or the corporate finance director of Alternative Networks, who said, look, basically we're they were sort of very much a telco organization at the time, but with they're AIM listed with a fantastic customer base. But I think they recognised the margins were tight in what they're doing. They're looking to expand the range of services. So they put a very sort of tentative offer into us that we felt was nothing like what we'd considered. But, I just mentioned there was quite a few other types of those conversations.
Interesting conversations you were having. I guess you were building your own knowledge base and understanding what the market was looking for.
Yes.
Okay.
And then in the June of that year, we got an approach from an American VC that seemed to be a really serious one, saying, look, we're looking to do a European buy and build. They'd been trying to buy a Norwegian company that did similar services to ours, but that actually gone to a different American VC, and they were using that to do a buy and build in Europe, fairly similar services to what we're doing. And they said, look, we're really serious about this. Would like to get a deal concluded fairly quickly. So we discussed it with the board, and we decided to appoint an advisor, principally because we thought it'd be useful for us to have an advisor to maximise our exit value. The VC very much wanted one as well. That's the process that they tend to go through. And we also felt that it would probably, these were an American VC, we thought it'd be good to get some competitive tension into the process as well. And we really wanted an advisor with access to that American VC investor base. So where we sort of knew the UK VCs, potential UK sort of corporate acquirers, but didn't really have many contacts out in that area. So we appointed Armour Associates in June of that year.
Armour Associates, they're specialists in your sector.
Yes, they're fairly well known as sort of tech advisors. What then transpired was all quite interesting, really, I guess. So the American VC that had offered to, and they sort of tabled an offer that we thought was quite reasonable, and we were sort of going, and this was in June, and they said, look, we'll get the deal done by the end of the summer, which obviously is an incredible tight timeline.
Ambitious, yeah.
What I had done over the sort of, I guess, the preceding sort of 6 months or so, because I could see the time was going to come, whether it was that summer or the following summer. Scottish Equity Partners had had been invested for 3.5 years or so. Typically, a VC looks at a 3 to 4, 5 year timeline between them wanting to exit.
Yeah.
I said myself and Damien have been in it for 13 years. I think that Damien had touched on, we were now getting slightly more removed from the business because we built up that management team. So, there was just an all-round feel that was going to be an exit coming.
Yeah, all the stars would be into a line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, when I looked at our, which is quite a critical point for us, when I looked at our large renewals for our support contracts, because typically they were sort of 3-5 years or so, I could see that around March 2014 was quite a good time when there wasn't any large contracts coming up for renewal. So that kind of gave us quite a nice window if we did want to market ourselves. So that was quite a good time to do it. Because what you don't want to be is having 2 or 3 of your bigger customers renewing in the next 3 or 4 months. Otherwise, clearly that puts a bit of jeopardy around the sales process. So
all right. So yeah, you were very focused, very
yes,
planning ahead,
yes,
laser-like in your strategy in terms of the timing, which is really important, I think. So yeah.
So I'd begun to build up a bit of a data room beforehand. Just I'd say to anyone, get this stuff done as soon as you can. Get the basics done. So you just make sure that you've got copies, scans of all your customer contracts, put them up in a data room. All this sort of stuff you can do way ahead of time. All your accounts, all your secretarial stuff, all the staff contracts, all the boring stuff you can get in there way ahead of time. And then when it actually comes to diligence and the processes, you can focus on the more important elements and the bits that you think will make the difference when it comes to the sale. You don't want to be scrambling
obviously
around.
You're looking for old contracts and things that you've forgotten to file properly.
Exactly.
And obviously your personal experience then at KPMG and the corporate finance team, that's you know what a buyer's going to look for, what needs to be in that data room.
Yes.
So you begin to build it out ahead of time, which saves time down the line.
Exactly. Yes. So I've done a fair bit of due diligence, when I was at KPMG, on other companies. So I knew what I should be preparing and what people would be looking for. I'd say probably the most important thing I'd say if you're looking to sell a business from that is, one, get the preparation done early, but also think, if you were a buyer of that business, what would put you off buying it, or what would you be wary about? What would scare you? And then just prepare the answers to those elements and those questions. So, I'll give you an example from our business. By this time we were turning over probably 21, 22 million or so, a lot of it under support contract, a lot of it with long-term support contracts, but we weren't very profitable as a business, because we were reinvesting all the money we were making back into the business to build out the different services we could offer. That was, I think we've grown 35% year on year on average for the last 8-9 years or so, but we were reinvesting back in the business to keep that growth going. So, clearly a lot of the valuations were done on EBITDA multiples. Well, our EBITDA multiple would have been relatively low because our EBITDA wasn't great. So as an example, I prepared an analysis to say, okay, well, let's look at the business in 3 different ways. Let's look at it to see, what are we spending on winning new business, and what are we reinvesting back in the business? What would a business look like if we cut all that out and just had it as a pure support business, running the existing customer contracts and maybe growing at 10% a year just organically from those contracts and just some minor customer wins? And then and by doing that, you could then sort of show people or show prospective buyers, well, look, if we're growing at a rate of a normal business, this is the EBITDA we'd be producing. But in actual fact, our EBITDA is low because we're investing all this money to keep this 35% growth rate going. So those kind of analyses.
Yeah, so you identified, if you like, the kind of the negatives or the things that a potential buyer could push back with you on. You said, yeah, we've already thought that through, and here's our view on it. This is why you should. So this is really important, I think, for anyone listening to this. You effectively you sold them a story or what the future business could look like in their hands, and therefore kind of reverse engineered it into a valuation that was more in line with what you were looking for.
Yes.
Versus what they might want to pay. That's really sensible advice.
And the earlier you can do those things, what you don't want to be doing is in a conversation with them down the road and they ask that question and you haven't got that stuff prepared, and then you're scrambling around trying to find an answer, and a week's gone by, and by that time they're thinking, maybe not then.
If these guys aren't serious, or
yes,
you can chip away.
And if you can address these things early on, you've got the answer, you give them, and you move on, and that's then off the table completely, and you're on to the next thing.
Yeah. So think through all what could anyone say which was potentially detrimental or negative to what you were trying to say, and really do you think it through and come up with your well-researched, evidence-based response, so you can reply pretty quickly to any objections that have got. That's great advice. All about preparation.
Yeah.
So what was the process like? So you appoint this kind of M&A firm, and what happens? Damian, back to you. Just talk us through the process. Did they sort of take this to the market? Did you create a number of potential buyers? What happened?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they put a lot of effort into creating the model and working with Si to build a very attractive prospectus, and through their network and our network, built a sort of a list of potential acquirers, and and we met many of them. We presented, but all the time having the ones that we'd spoken to the previous year sort of there in the background and warming, and clearly there's a real benefit if you can make it competitive, and you've got 2 or 3 people really interested, and that clearly can improve your position. Armour did a great job, and we all have to say, the management team, the board, we were very aligned. We were working the customers that needed to re-sign contracts, and really pulling everything together to really ensure that, yes, there were no gaps, there was nothing really that we couldn't answer or didn't feel comfortable answering, and then obviously just creating that competitive tension.
But what actually transpired, Alan, was probably not at all what we thought would be the process when we appointed Armour. So this American VC that we'd been very interested over the summer when we first appointed Armour, we just started dragging their heels. September was our year end, so it kind of got to August and things hadn't really progressed forward. And we sort of said to them at that point, look, we've got to focus on our year end. We've got to deliver our numbers this year end. I've got to get a good forecast done for next year. So we, with Armour, basically said to them, look, we're going to run a process now in March next year, which was the timeline that I think with Armour would agree would be our timeline. Come back into that process, and we sort of stopped speaking to them really around September time. And meanwhile, Armour lined up other prospective US VCs that could be interested, and the whole thought process then was really to run a process that would culminate in a sale in the March time. What then happened, it was quite interesting, was the sort of CEO of Alternative Networks sort of kept an indirect communication with Damian going as well, us having sort of rebuffed them sort of 6 months beforehand. And I think he reached out to Damian around mid-September time and said, how are things going? And Damian gave him the update. He said, look, we'd just love to meet you guys get to a year end, and we'll maybe meet up in October, and why don't you come in and just show us what you're doing, what you think you'll do next year, etc. All sort of sounding quite informal, etc. So I remember it was mid-October time. Myself and Damian, I think we went down to Sloane Square to meet them, and we just thought it was a fairly informal catch up with their sort of corporate finance guy that I'd first been introduced to, and the CEO that Damian knew quite well. We went into the meeting, and it got invited into the meeting room, and literally the whole board was there, including their non-execs. And luckily Damian prepared a presentation of where we are, and we had the forecast for the following year prepared, etc. So we presented what the outcome of that current year was, or it hadn't actually been audited yet, but where we thought we'd get to, what the forecast was for next year, and kind of said, look, and the idea now is we're going to run a formal process in March. It'll be 13 years for us and 4 years for the investor. So we'll have an exit at that, and we'd love you to participate in it. And I mean, Damien can probably pick it up, but I think basically you've picked up the phone to Damien the next day and said, sorry, we really do want to buy you. We don't want to risk it going to this process. What are you looking for, basically? So Damien gave them a figure.
Like name your number.
Yes,
almost.
Yeah. So we named a number that we genuinely thought we'd probably get throughout that process. They gave us a figure that was very close to that and said, look, we'll get this deal done. We'll get this deal done this side of Christmas. An incredibly short time frame, but again, we were, by this point, properly prepared for any sort of diligence exercise. And ultimately, we finally got the deal done. We would have got it done around about the end of the year. We didn't quite make it before Christmas. Then obviously Christmas gets in the way and people drift off. So we finally got the deal signed, I think, on the 31st of January, 2014. So we didn't actually.
But you only started October.
Yes. It's still
from October to January with a Christmas in the middle.
Yes, it was.
That's some going.
Yes.
To get that done. So you did. So interestingly, this was you maintained relationships with people. You didn't fall out with anyone. Didn't work first time round, but you get in contact. And then a lot of this is about timing as well, isn't it? They just felt that they had to buy you, and you had familiarity with them. So it worked. I mean, just briefly. I mean, obviously, it's a pretty fast process, but any looking back on it, any sort of big issues or challenges? I guess lawyers get involved. It can be a bit complex, but Damien, what's your recollection of that period going through? It can be quite intense, can't it?
Definitely stressful. I mean, exciting and stressful. And obviously we had offers before, and the US guys that didn't follow through. There was always an element of, actually, is this really going to happen? But Si and the team had done a huge amount of work. I mean, we all had on really across the business, making sure that everything was sort of buttoned down and completed. So I mean, it was a very swift process. Armour were brilliant in sort of holding our hand and just really making sure the communication was there. And we all had alignment. I had a great relationship with the chairman and top guy, and was keeping him updated. I think every time we spoke, I had a bit of good news for him, and that we've just won another deal, and this is closed now, and that definitely helps. But it was both exciting and stressful, and we managed to get it done. I think what time? 1 a.m, 2 a.m. We sort of
they're always middle of the night, aren't they? These completions. Well, where were you? Just remember, were you in your lawyer's office or what? Was
actually, their lawyers. I can't remember if it was Bird and Bird. I can't remember, but it was their law firm, and it was our entire team, and our board, etc. And we got it done. But real relief. It was quite a journey.
I'll bet. What did you do, Damien? What did you celebrate? Did you go?
It's funny, actually. It's funny. So say it was 3 a.m.
I was living 5 a.m. It was.
I was at 5 a.m. And I was living in Sussex and where I am now, and Si went back to Radlett, and Si went into the office, gave the news to the team. Everyone was super excited, and he phoned me and said, "You're going to come in. I know you're tired. You're going to come in, and everyone wants to meet you." And by the way, we decided very early on, everyone should have shares. It's a team effort. Everyone should be rewarded. You sort of hear about it in the US, or certainly it's just the directors, the C-suite that do really well. We really wanted to make sure that everyone, including the cleaner, did really well out of a UK sort of tech business. So he said, "You got to come in. You got to meet the team." And I said, "I've just bought a sort of a limited edition custom Rolls Royce. I'm just picking it up, and then I'll be driving in." I celebrated probably in the only way I know how, which is I love cars, and yeah, it's been
Nice,
a long
nice.
journey.
You you rewarded yourself. Rolls
Yeah,
Royce.
definitely.
Nice one. Well, congratulations there. What about you, Simon? What did you buy yourself a fancy car?
Yeah, I'm not really a car person, unfortunately, much to Damien's disgust. But I mean, I think the biggest, and I think it's probably the same for Damien as well, the biggest satisfaction I got from it was actually just looking at the effect it had on some of the staff as well. So,
Yeah.
most of the middle managers, a lot of them have been with us for 4 or 5 years or so. And as Damien said, they all had share options. And because they're a listed company, it got announced to the market just before it opened on the Friday morning. So I was in on the Friday morning, not had much sleep at all, and just really going through with the staff what it meant to them in terms of their share options. And I'll never forget there was one guy that was ex-military that was with us, and he had some share options. He was a sort of, manager within the business. They were worth a couple of £100,000 or so. And he came in my office, and I gave the presentation, and he sort of came in about half hour later and said, "Well, actually, Simon, I've done the maths on what you said we'll get per option, and this is what I think I'm getting out of it. Is this right?" And I looked at it and said, "Yeah, that's right." And he was almost becoming quite emotional about it. And he said, "Well, when will I get this?" Thinking it will be, maybe 6 months' time. I said, "Oh, it should be in your bank by the end of play today." And
Wow.
and yeah, the impact that had, that was probably enough to pay his mortgage off, or enable him and he hadn't long got married, and enabled him to buy a new house or something. So yeah, the impact on people's lives was tangible, and it was great. You get a great feeling from that. It was great to see.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, literally life changing.
Yes.
Life changing for people.
Yeah, and
who all contributed. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And we went to, I remember myself and Damien went to one of these sort of tech events at the Excel a week or so later, after we'd done the sale. And obviously it's just one industry, everyone knows about it. And the number of people that came up to us and said, "Congratulations, guys, great exit, but well done for looking after the staff as well," because obviously news was around about the staff making money out of the options, etc. And it was a great thing.
I think that's hugely powerful. It's a great story. I mean, every business owner, every founder can do it different ways. Some aren't keen, some do, and it clearly worked in your case. And it wasn't just the C-suite, as you say. Pretty much everyone participated.
Yeah.
And everything it sounds like everyone got something meaningful out of it. And some people say money's not important, but I tell you what, it's up there with oxygen. It's quite important overall. Brilliant story. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm conscious that we're running longer than we normally do, but I'm not stopping this because I think it's just there's so many messages and so many valuable lessons to be learned that other founders and entrepreneurs can pick up from. So I just want to just briefly touch on you then. Were you on an earn-out? Were you with the company for a period of time, or what was your conditions of post sale, Simon? What do you have to stay around?
So no, because as Damien has said, we'd spent a long time putting a management team in. We were on no earn out. We didn't really want to earn out. I've rarely seen an earn out work successfully in the time I've been advising people or dealing with it. So we were specific that there wouldn't be an earn out component there. And we didn't feel it needed to be because of the longevity of the support contracts. I think I left at the end of March, so I literally did a handover to the CFO of the acquiring business. Being in finance, you generally not really wanted to be around anyway, to be honest, once they understand what's going on. And I had a very good financial controller there. To be honest, I've probably spent the last 5 years not really becoming an accountant, more just dealing with customer contracts the whole time. So, their in-house legal sort of took over the management of all the contractual positions, etc. Damian hung on a bit later on. He hung on for probably 8-9 months or so, mainly because there were some big new deals that were sort of going through the sales pipeline. So he was there just to get those sort of closed off. But no, we'd really got the business into a position where it wasn't dependent upon us anymore. And we'd recognise that, a few years beforehand, that if we left the business dependent upon us, we could never really properly exit from it. So it was one of the things we'd use the investment money to build up a good management team there.
Yeah, makes sense. So Damian, you stayed around a bit longer, but I guess at this stage, without going into the real details, you're in a position of financial comfort, shall we say? You've cashed out. You've thrown a lot of money at a fancy car, but you still got a bit of spec. Looking back on it, this again to me is just a fascinating process. You're founders, entrepreneurs, scaling, building, throwing heart and soul into building a business, and then you're not. So your life's different quite quickly. Your life's different. You've got a different set of challenges, I suppose. You've got some liquid capital. You're no longer running a business. What was kind of the personal journey for you, Damian, going through that as a successfully exited entrepreneur at that stage? Can you remember what was going on?
Yeah, I guess several things. So Si and I had agreed before I probably exited the company to that we wanted to go on a bit of a family sort of Winnebago tour around the States, or part of the States. So we did that. So he had one motorhome, I had the other. And yeah, that was super exciting. So we definitely had some time off, did some family stuff. The family, both our families, were hugely supportive, and really couldn't do it without them. But I was really itchy feet, and I had an idea for a business, which obviously is amplifying what we're doing now. Sort of before we exited, didn't do anything, but it was definitely in the back of my mind. This is really exciting, and I guess what I'd seen, sort of working with other technology companies and consumer businesses, probably more so. So we looked after Rightmove, we looked after Betfair, at Control Circle. So I had, I guess a bit of an understanding of their businesses. So I was really keen to start something else. And I think my nature is I get bored very quickly. I need to keep entertained. So yeah, I was very keen to get Si involved and start something. And I also think the opportunity and the market, a bit like what had happened before, when we first started Control Circle with the .com and the bubble bursting, that created opportunity. Even though it was challenging times, I always sort of felt if you could grow in a really challenging time, actually, when things improve, you've got you got a great base and a great opportunity there. So yeah, I was keen to start something new.
Yeah, again, this I find fascinating and interesting. Of some of the other people that I've spoken with on this podcast who had great successful exits and didn't have a next adventure, a next business, and sort of sat around a little bit, counting the bank account numbers, didn't enjoy the process. I think you've got it in your DNA, in your blood, and I think it just to not have a purpose or something to drive you for people like you guys. It doesn't end well, and so just having something to get your teeth into, which I guess is what you're doing now. You sort of take some time out, pay back some of that time that your family's been supporting you with, and it's all good stuff, and then right back at it, right? And I guess that it's far less about. I don't think based on what you said, it was ever about the money. But you're doing this now from a position of, I guess, financial strength as well on a personal basis. Yes. So let's just quickly jump into that. So what is the current adventure? Tell us, share with us exactly what you're doing now, what the current business is.
Yeah, so the company's called Amplify. We're a holistic health platform driven by your wearable. So basically you plug in your wearable and then that personalizes your health journey. So if you are, really comfortable on the fitness side, but maybe sleep or nutrition is a weak area, we will support you with content, with training programs, experts to really help fill the gap and really support you. So it's built built with an incredible community of health experts. It's also integrating to some great technology, so things like the Apple Watch and the Fitbits, etc. So we're getting a really unique set of data, and then we gamify that whole experience. So there's a really big rewards component. So again, we're really looking to change behaviors. So people that maybe are less keen or need more motivation, how can we do that through gamification and rewards? So it's a really, really exciting project, very, very challenging, but I think I think what an incredible opportunity to have a positive impact on people's lives post COVID. I think where people are really struggling with with mental health, they're struggling with hybrid working and cost of living. I think there's a huge opportunity for Amplify to play an important role. So, full of challenges.
I'm sure,
but really cool.
Sounds really interesting. So, where are you now? Are you raising investments? What sort of stage is the business at?
Yeah, so we built the platform, been building the platform really for the last 5 years. We put a lot of effort into the platform. We now have incredible commercial relationships with the likes of CBRE, Westfield Health, the big health insurer, and more recently Apple. So we're Apple's health platform partner, which means we really add value to the Apple Watch and Apple Health.
That's a nice business to partner with. For sure.
It's really exciting. Yeah, really. In all my days, I've never worked with such an incredible partner that I think they say no to 99% of potential partners, but when they say yes, they put 200% effort into you, and they've just been incredible with the support, with the guidance, but also opening up their network of corporates, carriers. So clearly, it's game changing. I mean, it took Si and I probably a year and a half to do the deal, but yeah, really exciting. So to answer your question, we are our final individual sort of EIS round at the moment. Really looking to close that off end of the year, and then we'll look for a substantial Series A end of Q2, Q3 next year.
Wow! Right, really exciting times. Doing it
really cool
all over again, but with all the lessons you've learned from your previous journey.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic.
It would be lovely to think, Alan, we could be back in another 3 or 4 years telling you about the adventure with Amplify.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, that's the plan.
We look forward to that, having you on as a repeat guest. Guys, as we kind of wind our way towards the close, I want to ask you a question that I ask, and I'll do one at a time. I ask everyone on this. I've really, over the years, begun to be fascinated by the concept, this phrase, true wealth. Recognizing that money's a part of it, but it's not the only thing. If I was to ask you, Simon, what does true wealth mean to you? How would you reply?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked it before, but I think what wealth does is give you choices in life. It doesn't make you happy. It certainly shouldn't make you sad. It gives you choices, and depending on what you do with those choices, you can enhance your life, or you can, potentially not enhance your life. And, I think a bit like you mentioned before, people that get a great exit and then sit at home doing nothing, well, they probably haven't particularly enhanced their life from it. They've become slightly, they probably miss out on the contact they had beforehand. And we read about lots of lottery winners that sort of have all the money, buy all the cars, and give up work and sort of sit at home and watch TV all day, and they don't seem particularly happy from it. So I think for me, it's the choice it gives you. So yes, you can afford the cars should you want them. I'm not really a car person, but I love holidays. Love the holidays. Bought a nice house. You can sort out your kids and your family and things like that. Yeah. And yes, do what you want to do in life, and it gives you the freedom to have those choices.
Yeah, that's great. Time freedom is so important, I think, for all of us. Damian, would you anything different to that? True wealth, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say it's not too dissimilar. I think for me, it is all about time. So, clearly having the money allows you the freedom to be able to do a bit more of what you want to do and spend time. Certainly for me, family and siblings, and also traveling and seeing the world a little bit more, and maybe doing it with a bit more sort of luxury than before. But really, it's about time, spending it with the right people and doing the right things, and Amplify. Yeah, I mean, it is super exciting venture at a very important time, I think. But also it is fun. It is, if you had a choice, it's important to do something that you're passionate about, you're interested in, that keeps you challenged.
Yeah.
So for me, yeah, very much it's about time.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Makes a lot of sense. Last question, really. I'll go to you, Damian. In terms of inspiration or resources, are you someone that reads books or listens to podcasts or watches films? What inspires you, particularly on the business side of things? Where have you taken your ideas and inspiration from?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great closing question. I think, I mean, probably since lockdown, I've definitely been listening to a lot more podcasts
Right.
and reading a bit more. So I love Guy Raz and I Built This, and for me, it's just addictive. I love the stories. For me, it sort of just cemented my position. All the things that I sort of felt maybe it was me, was I being difficult, was it actually just my circumstance, or actually they've all had similar challenges.
Yeah.
Whether it's Rivian and for every 150 people he pitched to try and get investment, he got one maybe. I mean, it's just whether it was Leatherman and it took him 7 years to sell one Leatherman. I mean, what great stories. So definitely got into that. I also really like Brené Brown, Daring Greatly, about showing up and being in the arena. I think a lot of people, there's obviously a lot of opinion, a lot of people certainly online criticize and can be very negative, but unless they're in it, doing it, building a company, then can they really comment? So I think she's very inspirational, Brené Brown. The courage to really show up and be seen, I think is really important. Certainly in this day and age where actually it's quite easy to hide. So that's both
Great.
of those very inspirational.
And absolutely, I'm going to post a link in the show notes to that. There's an excerpt. You can watch the whole thing, but there's a short excerpt of Brené Brown talking and reciting the famous the speech. The man in the arena. And I tell you, the hair on the back of your neck stands up.
It does.
It's absolutely right. It is so easy in this modern sort of tech age to be a keyboard warrior, to sit behind your keyboard and say, "Yeah, you're rubbish, you're useless." And you've never done it, and so you're right. I'm not listening to anyone like that unless you're in the arena covered in mud 100%. And blood and shit. I ain't listening to you, and it's brilliant. I'll post it.
It is.
I'll post it because it is worth everyone watching that. It's worth 2 minutes of everyone's time. Simon, your thoughts? What's inspired you over the years? How do you sort of consume your ideas?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess when we started the business, it was pre-podcasts. That's how long ago when we started Control Circle. But so I think for me, probably the inspiration was just seeing other people that I'd come across that had started their own businesses, that have been successful, and I just admired them for creating something where there was nothing beforehand. And I think for me, looking back on our business, it was the fact that you can create something where there was nothing there before. So I was always fantastically inspired by people that had through their own initiative created great businesses themselves, and that was
being in a community, being in a community, just meeting people, listening to people. I mean, this is the big idea behind this podcast: storytelling. It's just everyone is unique. Everyone's got their own journey. I've never spoken to an entrepreneur that just had a smooth ride. It was fine. I had a great idea, started it. Someone wrote me a check. It's a roller coaster, isn't it? Up and down. There's lessons learned all the way. And like you guys, I'm just fascinated by it, by the lessons learned. And particularly for those like you guys have done and continue to do, who make a positive impact in the world. That's a good thing as well. You know that you are making a difference, in this case, your case, to your colleagues and the people that helped you build the business, but now with the work you're doing to a much broader community and society. So thank you so much for that, guys. I've taken up a lot more of your time than I had anticipated, but
Alan, can I just leave you with one sort of final little story just around really just giving it a go. And we talked about Brené Brown, I think, showing up, but also just removing any barrier and you being that only barrier. And I'll just tell you a funny little story. I remember when I pitched to JP Morgan, we were literally a few man sort of band. We were teeny, JP Morgan, huge corporate offices. And they grilled me for 2 hours around my process and how big the team was. And obviously it was very small. And I remember we were so young that we didn't have business cards, and a designer friend of mine created a business card for me. So it's 2 bits of paper on a bit of card, and you could see it was handmade. So I gave it to JP Morgan, but I had to, at the end of the meeting, sneak it and take it back because I didn't want them to know, what's this guy turning up with this sort of handmade business card. And I've heard so many people over the years say, I need a website, I need this, and I need a phone. So I need the product. You don't need anything. It's really you're the barrier, and you've just got to go out and give it a go. I just wanted to leave you with that.
So well said, David. So well said. You're right. I'm going to wait until I've got a logo and a business card and an office and a team.
Exactly.
And you're out there pitching to one of the biggest banks in the world with a handmade scrappy business card that you had to steal back by the end of the meeting. Hilarious. Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's brilliant because it sums up that entrepreneurial spirit. You just get on with it. Brilliant. Guys, if any of the audience or the listeners want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about Amplify or anything else, what's the best way of communicating with you? You're on LinkedIn, or is it a website? What's the best way?
Yeah, but I mean, definitely LinkedIn, but also, by all means, email, D Milkins at amplifylife.com or S Hancock at amplifylife.com. But I'm sure we'll
put all those links.
Brilliant. By all means.
Yeah. Anyone wants to get in touch with you,
and also if they need help, we're keen. We talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners. Any advice or if they've got advice for us, love to build our network.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you for your time and all your insight and observations.
Absolute pleasure, Alan. I really enjoyed it. No, super.
Brilliant stories. Thanks, guys. Damian, thanks really so much. I look forward to catching up with you again soon. Take care. 100%. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alan.
Bye.
Thanks for making it this far. I hope you found this episode to be helpful. If so, I'd like to ask you for a small favor. Can you please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, as that's one of the best ways for others to find it. And please send a link to the podcast to 3 friends or colleagues who you know will find it helpful. That way we can spread the word and everyone can benefit. All the show notes and links from every episode can be found at www.entrepreneurtransition.com. Thanks again for tuning in and being part of our community. I'll see you next time.